Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Cheating Stories Hub. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world are you watching from right now. Let us know in the comments now. Let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Shadows of Betrayal. The screen flickered as I leaned closer to the monitor, my pulse hammering, sweat slick on my palms. There it was, her face. My wife Isabella, smiling that sly, knowing smile. Across from her sat Andrew, her stepfather. The grainy footage stuttered for a second before catching up. It was the kitchen camera footage from months ago. I unmuted the file, and their voices came through, clear as a bell. The look on his face will be priceless, Andrew said, his tone low and gleeful. Isabella giggled, a sound I used to adore, but now sent chills down my spine. When do you think we should tell him? She teased, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't recognize, or perhaps refuse to see. At the anniversary party, Andrew replied, smirking as he leaned back in his chair. It'll be perfect, right in front of everyone. I pressed pause, bile rising in my throat. My kids' faint laughter echoed from somewhere else in the house, oblivious to the storm brewing. I stare at the frozen screen, their smiles etched into my mind like a nightmare. Right in front of everyone, at the party. My world tilted as those words looped in my head. Isabella and Andrew, whispering conspirators, plotting my humiliation. With shaking hands, I skipped forward to the next clip. A new day, a different angle. The dining room camera captured the two of them seated side by side. Between them lay a folder. Andrew tapped it twice, then slid it toward Isabella. She smirked as she opened it. My chest tightened as I glimpsed papers and charts, though the resolution wasn't sharp enough to make them out. Do you think the kids will care when they find out? Isabella asked, her tone almost light. Not at first, Andrew replied with a thin, cruel smile. But they'll come around. They always do. He's not half the man he pretends to be, Isabella said with a soft laugh. Then she glanced directly at the camera. For a split second, her eyes seemed to lock with mine. My blood ran cold. I hit pause again, ears ringing with silence. What the hell was this? My marriage? My family? My life? It was as if a dark secret had been writhing beneath it all, waiting to surface. Dragging the slider to the next file, I watched the living room camera footage from late at night. The kids were asleep. Isabella and Andrew sat on the couch, wine glasses in hand. Their voices were softer, almost intimate. We've waited long enough, Andrew said, swirling his wine. He deserves to know the truth. Isabella bit her lip and nodded. I'll get the DNA test done before the party. I want the timing to be dramatic. DNA tests? I froze. My mind reeled, shards of thought clicking together like broken glass reforming. My kids. My hands trembled as I hit rewind, playing the clip again. He deserves to know the truth, Andrew had said. The truth about what? That my children weren't mine. I rewound again, desperate for answers. Instead, the fragmented pieces of my world shattered further. In another clip, Andrew leaned close to Isabella, his voice venomous. Once he's humiliated in front of everyone, once the kids see him for what he really is, he paused, savoring the thought. He'll be nothing. A joke. I slammed my fist against the desk. Pain shot through my hand, snapping me out of the daze. A joke. That's what I was to them. My wife and her stepfather. Smiling, drinking, planning to destroy me. But they didn't know I had this. They didn't know I'd seen everything. My eyes darted to the calendar. The party was 5 days away. 5 days to uncover their plan. 5 days to ensure their spectacle turned on them. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of the monitor, replaying the clips until my eyes burned. My wife and her stepfather, two people I thought I knew, had woven a web so vile, so intricate, that I couldn't wrap my head around it. By morning, I was shaking with exhaustion, my thoughts tangled. My children, Liam and Sophie, sat at the breakfast table munching on cereal. Isabella breezed into the kitchen, radiant as ever, humming a tune. "Morning, darling," she said, kissing me on the cheek. Her lavender perfume lingered, the same scent she'd worn since we first met. Once comforting, now tainted. I couldn't even look at her. "Morning," I muttered, my voice hoarse. "Late night?" she asked casually, pouring coffee into her favorite mug, her tone light and sweet. It grated against my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Deadlines," I replied stiffly. She nodded, scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the war raging in my chest. But I knew I couldn't confront her yet. One wrong move, and they know I was on to them. That night, I met Owen, my oldest friend and the only person I trusted. An IT genius, he could crack into anything with a keyboard and caffeine. If anyone could dig deeper into the recordings, it was him. In his cluttered garage, surrounded by old monitors and servers, I handed him the flash drive. "What are we looking for?" he asked. "Everything," I said, barely containing the edge in my voice. "Every file. Every frame. I need to know what I missed." Owen got to work immediately, lines of code flickering on his screen. My pulse thundered as I paced behind him. Then he froze. "Jesus, man." "What?" Without answering, Owen dragged a video file to the center of the screen and hit play. The footage showed Isabella on the porch steps, her arms crossed. Andrew loomed over her, his face inches from hers. "You think he suspects anything?" Andrew growled. Isabella exhaled sharply. "If he did, he'd have confronted me already." "You give him too much credit, Andrew. He's too stupid to put two and two together." Rage exploded in my chest. I gripped the edge of Owen's desk, my knuckles white. The video continued. "The party's the perfect time," Andrew said. "You get the DNA results by then, and we'll lay it all out. Make him look like the fool he is." Isabella smiled. "I just hope the kids won't hate me for it. But they deserve the truth, don't they?" The screen went black. Owen turned to me, his expression grave. "This isn't just betrayal. This is war." I nodded, jaw clenched. They wanted a spectacle. Fine. They get one. But not the one they were hoping for. Chapter 2: The Gathering Storm. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal was like poison coursing through my veins, but the clarity it brought was sharper than ever. I had 5 days to prepare. 5 days to ensure that their twisted plan would unravel right before their eyes. At breakfast, Isabella moved through the kitchen as if nothing had changed. She hummed while flipping pancakes, the picture of domestic perfection. But I saw the cracks now. Her every move seemed calculated, every word a performance. "Big day at work?" she asked, placing a plate in front of me with her signature warm smile. "Yeah," I muttered, barely looking up from my coffee. Liam and Sophie chattered excitedly about their school projects, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. I forced a smile as I watched them. My children, at least I thought they were mine. The DNA test loomed in my mind, a silent scream I couldn't escape. Isabella sat across from me, sipping her coffee, her eyes studying me. "You seem distracted," she said, tilting her head. "Deadlines," I replied again, keeping my tone neutral. I couldn't let her see the storm brewing beneath the surface. That evening, I met Owen again. This time, I needed more than just files. I needed leverage. As I entered his garage, he was already deep into his work. Multiple screens displayed recovered clips, folders, and extracted data. "You're not going to like this," Owen said, swiveling in his chair to face me. "What now?" He opened a new file. The screen showed Andrew pacing in his living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. Isabella sat on the armrest of his chair, her posture casual yet intimate. "He's getting too comfortable," Andrew growled. "If he starts suspecting something, this could blow up in our faces." Isabella rolled her eyes, exasperated. "He's too stupid, Andrew." You're overthinking it. After the party, it's done. We tell him everything, the kids see who he really is, and we're free of him. Andrew stopped pacing, pointing a finger at her. This isn't just about being free of him. This is about showing him he's nothing. He took everything from me, my daughter's loyalty, my respect. Do you know how humiliating it's been to watch him succeed while I'm left to rot? Isabella smirked. You'll get your revenge. Just trust me. Andrew raised his glass. To the party. The screen froze on Isabella's smirking face, her confidence radiating like a toxic glow. Owen leaned back, shaking his head. This isn't just an affair. This is personal. That guy hates you. I nodded, my jaw tight. He's not just after me. He's using Isabella to destroy my family. You need to confront her, Owen said cautiously. Not yet, I replied firmly. They think they're in control. I'm going to show them how wrong they are. The next morning, I called Andrew. My voice was deliberately casual, masking the rage bubbling beneath the surface. Hey, Andrew. Long time, no talk. Well, he replied, his voice dripping with faux concern. Everything all right, Leo? Couldn't be better, I said. Listen, Isabella mentioned you're helping organize the anniversary party. I was thinking I'd like to make a speech. There was a pause, just a second too long. A speech? That's not really your style, is it? Maybe I'm feeling sentimental, I said evenly. It's a big event. I figured it's time I put in some effort. Andrew chuckled, though it lacked conviction. Of course. That's a great idea. Great, I said, leaning back in my chair. See you at the party. When I hung up, my heart was racing. He knew something was off, but I didn't care. I just planted the first seed of doubt. That evening, as I walked into the house, Isabella was already in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She glanced at me over her shoulder. Andrew called me today, she said, her voice light. Oh. He said you wanted to make a speech at the party, she continued, watching me closely. Since when do you like making speeches? I shrugged, pouring myself a glass of water. It's a big event. I thought it was time I showed some appreciation. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the knife pausing mid-slice. For a moment, I thought she would push, demand answers, or accuse me of something. But then she smiled and went back to chopping. That's sweet, she said. I smiled back, letting her think I was still the clueless husband she believed she could control. Let her think she had the upper hand. The day before the party, Owen called me again. You're going to want to see this, he said, his voice tense. When I arrived at his garage, he was sitting in front of his screens, a grim look on his face. Without a word, he hit play on a newly recovered video. The footage showed Andrew pacing in a dimly lit basement, a glass of whiskey in hand. Isabella sat slouched in a chair, looking bored. This is getting risky, Andrew muttered. If he starts piecing things together. He won't, Isabella interrupted, her tone impatient. After the party, it's done. He'll be humiliated in front of everyone. The kids will see him for what he really is. Andrew stopped pacing, his face twisting into a sneer. This isn't just about humiliation. This is about erasing him. Leo needs to see that he's nothing. That he's always been nothing. The video ended, and Owen turned to me. They're not just trying to hurt you, man. They're trying to destroy you. I nodded, my mind racing. Then it's time to show them what destruction really looks like. Chapter 3. Setting the Trap. The morning of the party dawned with an eerie calm. I hadn't slept much, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins kept me focused. Everything was in place. The evidence I'd gathered, the files Owen had recovered, and the DNA results, all tucked neatly onto a flash drive. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. Isabella was up early, bustling around the house with an almost manic energy. She barked orders at the caterers, fretted over decorations, and meticulously selected her outfit. She looked radiant in a way that once would have made my heart skip a beat, but now it only made my stomach churn. Every smile she threw my way, every casual brush of her hand against my arm, was an affront, a reminder of the lies she had been living. By mid-afternoon, the house was buzzing with the sound of guests arriving. Relatives, friends, neighbors, all there to celebrate what they thought was a milestone in our marriage. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, forcing smiles, and pretending I wasn't about to set their world on fire. When it was time, Isabella stood at the center of the living room and clinked her glass. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward her. She beamed, basking in the attention like this was her moment. "I just want to say how grateful I am to all of you for being here today," she began, her voice smooth and confident. "We've always been a close family, and today is about celebrating the truth. The truth." The irony of her words almost made me laugh. I stepped forward, cutting her off. "Actually," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I'd like to go first." Isabella froze, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Oh, of course. Go ahead," she said, stepping aside, though her eyes betrayed her unease. I turned to face the crowd, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "Thank you all for coming today. There's something very important I want to share with you. It's about my wife, Isabella, and her stepfather, Andrew." Gasps rippled through the room. Isabella's face went pale, her perfect composure cracking. Andrew, standing near the back of the room with a drink in hand, straightened, his smug expression replaced with a wary frown. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive. "Let's start with a little video," I said, plugging it into the TV. The room fell into an unnatural silence as the screen lit up. The footage began to play. The first clip showing Isabella and Andrew in the dining room, their voices echoing through the speakers. "Do you think the kids will care when they find out?" Isabella's voice asked, light and casual. Andrew's response followed, dripping with malice. "Not at first, but they'll come around. They always do." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Relatives exchanged horrified glances, while friends whispered in shock. I glanced at Isabella, who stood frozen, her eyes wide, her face pale. "Care to explain this, Isabella?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. Before she could respond, the next clip began to play. This one showed Andrew pacing in his basement, whiskey in hand. "This isn't just about humiliation," he growled. "This is about erasing him. Leo needs to see that he's nothing, that he's always been nothing." Andrew's face turned an alarming shade of red as the video ended. He stepped forward, his voice booming in an attempt to regain control. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything, Leo." "Am I?" I shot back, my voice sharp. "It's all right there, Andrew. Your words, your plan, your hatred. You think you can deny it now." The room was a storm of whispers, gasps, and shocked stares. Isabella finally found her voice, though it was shaky and weak. "This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "You're making it sound worse than it is." "Am I?" I countered, pulling the final nail from my pocket, the DNA test results. I held them up for everyone to see. "These results prove everything. The children I've raised, loved, and believed were mine. They're Andrew's." A collective gasp swept through the room. Someone dropped a glass, the sound of it shattering like a gunshot. Isabella stumbled back, clutching the edge of the table for support. Andrew's bravado had vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered look. "This ends today," I said, my voice firm as I looked out at the crowd. "You've all seen the truth. My wife and her stepfather have spent years plotting to destroy me, to ruin my family. But their lies end here." Andrew stepped forward, his voice rising in anger. "You're pathetic, Leo. Always playing the victim. Do you think this makes you look strong? You're just making a fool of yourself." "No, Andrew," I said, locking eyes with him. "You've been the fool all along. You thought you could manipulate me, tear me down, and get away with it. But now, everyone sees you for what you really are. The room erupted into chaos. Guests shouted, some crying, others storming out in disgust. Isabella crumbled into a chair, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. I turned to Liam and Sophie, who stood frozen in the corner, their young faces a mix of confusion and pain. My heart ached for them, but I reminded myself that they were victims too. I looked back at Isabella and Andrew, their carefully constructed facade now reduced to rubble. You wanted a spectacle, I said, my voice calm but cutting. Well, you got one. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, the weight of years of betrayal lifting with every step. The door slammed behind me, silencing the chaos inside. I stood on the porch, breathing in the cold evening air, my hands shaking with adrenaline. For the first time in years, I felt free. But I knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 4: Aftermath and Counterstrikes. The chaos inside the house reverberated in my mind as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. The party was over, the masks torn away, but the battle had only just begun. Isabella and Andrew had been exposed, but I knew they wouldn't go down quietly. People like them never did. My phone buzzed. It was Owen. You okay? He asked, his voice tight with concern. I'm fine, I said, though my hand still trembled. But it's not over. They'll fight back. Let them, he said. You've got the upper hand now. Stay calm and stick to the plan. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Thanks, Owen. For everything. Anytime. Just watch your back. I ended the call and took a deep breath. My next stop was the lawyer's office. The paperwork for the divorce was ready, and I had every intention of filing it first thing in the morning. I wasn't going to let Isabella or Andrew regroup. They'd had their time to scheme. Now it was my turn. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, I walked into the lawyer's office with the DNA results and the flash drive containing the damning evidence. My lawyer, Mr. Bennett, a sharp-eyed man with a reputation for being ruthless in the courtroom, was already waiting. You're sure about this? He asked, sliding the documents across the table for my review. Absolutely, I said, signing my name with a steady hand. I want the divorce filed immediately. Custody, financial protection, and everything else we discussed. He nodded. With the evidence you've provided, we have a strong case. The DNA results alone give us leverage, and the recordings show a clear pattern of psychological abuse. We'll push for full custody and ensure that Andrew has no contact with your children. And Isabella? I asked, my voice cold. She'll have limited visitation rights under strict supervision, he replied. Her role in this scheme won't sit well with the court. I exhaled, tension easing slightly. Good. And Andrew? We'll pursue a restraining order, Bennett said. He won't be allowed near you or the kids. I'm also filing a report with Child Protective Services to ensure his actions are documented. Make it happen, I said, standing up. I want this done quickly. It will be, he assured me. But be prepared, this will get ugly before it gets better. Underscore 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 underscore. When I returned home, the house was eerily quiet. Isabella was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. The screen was frozen on the last damning frame from the party, a shot of Andrew mid-sentence, his face twisted with malice. She didn't look up as I entered, but her voice cut through the silence like a knife. How could you do this to us? I dropped my bag on the counter and turned to face her. Do what, Isabella? Expose the truth. That's not something I did to us. That's something you and Andrew did. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't move me. The kids, Liam and Sophie, they're upstairs crying because of you. Because you humiliated me in front of everyone. I let out a cold laugh, shaking my head. No, Isabella. They're crying because their mother betrayed their father. Because the life they thought they had was built on lies. Don't you dare put this on me. She stood, trembling, her voice rising. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Andrew said. Andrew said. I interrupted, stepping closer. That's your excuse? That man manipulated you, used you, and turned you against your own family. And you let him. She froze, her lip trembling. You'll regret this, she whispered. You think you're strong, but you're not. You're just a pathetic man clinging to a broken life. I leaned in, my voice low and cold. Better a broken life than one built on lies. Without waiting for a response, I walked upstairs to check on Liam and Sophie. They were sitting on the floor in Liam's room, their faces pale and tear-streaked. Dad, Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What's going to happen to us? I knelt in front of them, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Everything's going to be okay, I said softly. I know this is hard, and it doesn't make sense right now, but I promise you I'm going to make things right. Sophie clutched her stuffed bunny tighter. Are we going to lose you? She asked, her voice trembling. No, I said firmly, taking their hands in mine. You're not going to lose me. I'm always going to be here for you. Always. The next few days were a whirlwind. News of the party spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Whispers turned into outright gossip, and soon everyone knew about Isabella and Andrew's affair. The DNA results were the final nail in the coffin, solidifying their fall from grace. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family and friends. Some were supportive, others simply curious. I ignored most of them, focusing on what mattered, protecting Liam and Sophie. Isabella, on the other hand, wasn't handling the fallout well. She spent hours pacing the house, arguing on the phone with Andrew, and trying to salvage what little reputation she had left. But the damage was done. By the end of the week, Andrew made his move. 2 police officers showed up at my door, with Andrew standing smugly behind them. Mr. Carter, one officer said, we've received a complaint of harassment and intimidation. Mr. Andrew has accused you of making false accusations and threatening behavior. Isabella appeared in the hallway, her face pale. He's lying, she shouted. He's lost his mind. I stayed calm, reaching into my pocket for my phone. Officers, I said, unlocking it and scrolling to a specific video. Before you take his word for anything, you should see this. I handed the phone to the lead officer. It was the clip of Andrew in his basement, plotting my humiliation. This isn't just about being free of him, Andrew's voice growled through the speaker. This is about showing him he's nothing. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions hardening. Where did you get this? The lead officer asked. Security cameras from my home, I said. They tried to delete the files, but I recovered them. I have more evidence, proof of their affair, their plan to humiliate me, and the DNA results proving Andrew's paternity of my children. Andrew's smugness vanished, replaced by panic. This is ridiculous, he shouted. He's twisting everything. But the officers weren't listening. Sir, the lead officer said, turning to Andrew, you'll need to come with us to answer some questions. As they led him away, Isabella crumbled to the floor, sobbing. I stood in the doorway, watching the patrol car drive off. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of control return. But I knew this was just one victory in a long war. Chapter 5. The war escalates. The house was eerily quiet after Andrew was escorted away. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me, but there was no time to dwell on the moment. The storm wasn't over. It was only growing. I knew Andrew wouldn't go down without a fight, and I expected Isabella to make her own moves. That night, I sat at the dining table with the divorce papers spread out in front of me. Isabella stayed upstairs, her presence a faint shadow moving through the house. Liam and Sophie were already asleep, their laughter replaced by an unsettling silence. My phone buzzed with a message from Owen. News just broke about Andrew. Local outlets picked up the story. Check it out. I grabbed my laptop, pulled up the news, and there it was. Community leader accused of family betrayal and manipulation. The article laid out everything: the affair, the DNA tests, and the damning recordings. Someone had leaked the files. Whether it was Owen, my lawyer, or another source, I didn't care. The truth was out, and Andrew's carefully crafted image was crumbling. I scrolled through the comments on the news site, a mix of outrage, shock, and disgust. People weren't on his side anymore. The whispers of gossip had turned into a full-blown reckoning. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, Isabella came downstairs, her eyes red and swollen. She moved past me silently, pouring herself a cup of coffee. The weight of her defeat hung heavy in the air. "You ruined everything," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "No, Isabella," I replied, not even looking up. "You and Andrew did that all on your own." She slammed the mug down on the counter, coffee spilling over the edge. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" I stood, my gaze locked on hers. "It's not about winning, Isabella. It's about protecting Liam and Sophie. It's about exposing the truth and stopping the lies." Her expression hardened. "Andrew won't let this go. He'll fight back." "Good," I said coldly. "Let him try. He's already lost everything." She stared at me for a moment, her anger barely contained, before storming out of the kitchen. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the house, a stark reminder of how far we'd fallen. Later that day, Owen called. "You're going to want to see this," he said, his tone serious. I drove to his garage, my chest tight with anticipation. When I arrived, he was sitting at his desk, his eyes fixed on one of the monitors. "What now?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. He didn't say anything, just turned the screen toward me and hit play. The video was grainy, shot on a phone, and the audio crackled faintly. It showed Andrew sitting in a dimly lit diner, leaning across the table toward an unknown man. "He thinks he's won," Andrew said, his voice low but clear. "But he has no idea what's coming. I've got people on my side, people who will make sure he regrets ever messing with me." The man across from him nodded, murmuring something inaudible, but Andrew's next words chilled me to the core. "I'll ruin him. I don't care what it takes." The clip ended, leaving me staring at the screen in silence. "He's not done," Owen said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. "He's planning something." I clenched my fists, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Send that to my lawyer. We need to use this." That evening, I called my lawyer, Mr. Bennett, and forwarded him the clip. "This is critical," I said. "It shows he's still actively trying to destroy me." Bennett's voice was calm but firm. "This strengthens our case significantly. Between the DNA test, the recordings, and now this, we've established a clear pattern of malicious intent. We'll push for a restraining order and expedite the custody hearing." "Good," I said. "I'm not letting him get anywhere near my kids." "You're doing the right thing," Bennett reassured me. "But be careful. Desperation can make people dangerous." The next morning, I made an unannounced visit to Andrew's favorite coffee shop. I knew he'd be there, holding court like the self-proclaimed king he believed himself to be. When I walked in, he was sitting near the window, half-empty cup of coffee in front of him. He noticed me immediately, his expression shifting from smug to defensive. "What the hell are you doing here?" he spat as I approached. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down, keeping my tone calm. "You've been busy, haven't you?" Andrew's lips twisted into a sneer. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned in, dropping my voice low. I know about the diner. I've seen the video. For a split second, his mask slipped, surprise flashing in his eyes. But he quickly recovered, leaning back in his chair with a hollow laugh. You think a little video changes anything? You're grasping at straws, Leo. No, Andrew, I said evenly. You are. You've lost everything. Your reputation, your family, and soon any chance of getting near my kids. His jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists on the table. Watch your back, he hissed, his voice laced with venom. I stood, towering over him. No, Andrew. You should watch yours. This is over. You just haven't realized it yet. I turned and walked out, leaving him sitting there, stewing in his own failure. For the first time, I felt like I was in control. When I got home that night, Liam and Sophie were in the living room trying to piece together a puzzle. It was the first time I'd seen them engaged in something normal since the party. Their laughter was cautious but genuine, a small reminder of what I was fighting for. Dad, Liam asked suddenly, looking up at me. Are things going to be okay? I crouched down beside him, forcing a smile. Yeah, buddy, I said softly. Things are going to be okay. For the first time, I believed it. Chapter 6, The Counterattack. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal preparation and emotional strain. Andrew's video from the diner, paired with the DNA results and recordings, gave my lawyer, Mr. Bennett, a powerful arsenal. But the battle was far from over. Andrew's threat lingered in my mind like a shadow, and Isabella's behavior grew increasingly erratic. I stayed focused on Liam and Sophie. They were my anchor, the reason I kept moving forward. Every morning, I reminded myself that this fight wasn't just about exposing the lies. It was about securing a stable future for them. 3 days after the party, the restraining order against Andrew was granted. He was officially barred from contacting me or the kids, and any violation would lead to immediate legal consequences. It was a victory, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still plotting in the background. The legal win wasn't enough for Isabella. She had spent the last few days on frantic phone calls, likely trying to salvage her reputation. I ignored her antics until she cornered me in the kitchen one evening. You're destroying our family, she accused, her voice trembling with anger. I turned to face her, keeping my tone calm. I didn't destroy anything, Isabella. You and Andrew did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Her eyes blazed. The kids hate you now. You've poisoned them against me. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. No, Isabella. They're hurt because their mother and grandfather betrayed their father. Don't blame me for the consequences of your choices. She recoiled, her anger faltering for a moment before she stormed out of the room. Her footsteps echoed through the house, but I didn't follow. I couldn't let her derail my focus. The next day, Mr. Bennett called with news. The custody hearing has been scheduled, he said. It's in 2 weeks. Andrew's threats and the DNA results have solidified your case. Good, I said. What about the divorce? It's moving forward, he replied. Isabella's lawyer is trying to argue for a more favorable settlement, but with the evidence we have, they're on shaky ground. I suggest you stay vigilant. They'll likely try to dig up anything they can use against you. Let them try, I said firmly. They won't find anything. After ending the call, I sat in my office, staring at the files and recordings spread across my desk. The pieces were coming together, but I knew Andrew and Isabella weren't finished. They had underestimated me before, and I wouldn't give them the chance to do it again. Later that night, my fears were confirmed. Owen called me, his voice urgent. Leo, I just intercepted some chatter online. It looks like Andrew's trying to hire someone to dig into your personal life. Old friends, coworkers, anyone who might have dirt on you. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Let him, I said. There's nothing to find. Still, Owen cautioned, I'm keeping an eye on it. If he tries anything, I'll shut it down Thanks, Owen, I said, grateful for his vigilance. Keep me updated. Hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Andrew was getting desperate, but desperation made people dangerous. I needed to be one step ahead at all times. The next morning, I took Liam and Sophie to the park. They needed a break from the tension at home, and I wanted to remind them that life could still be normal, even if only for a little while. As they played on the swings and climbed the jungle gym, I watched them with a bittersweet ache in my chest. "Dad," Liam called, running up to me. "Watch this." I smiled and nodded, encouraging him as he showed off his newfound skill on the monkey bars. Sophie followed, giggling as she tried to keep up with her brother. For a moment, their laughter drowned out the chaos in my mind. That evening, as I tucked them into bed, Sophie clutched her stuffed bunny tightly. "Daddy," she said softly, "are we going to be okay?" I knelt beside her bed, brushing her hair away from her face. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be okay. I promise." Her small hand reached for mine, and I held it, feeling the weight of her trust. Liam watched from his bed, his expression serious but calm. "We believe you," he said quietly. Hearing those words gave me the strength to keep going. The next day brought another surprise. My lawyer called with an update. "It seems Andrew is under investigation for financial misconduct," Bennett said. "Apparently, some of his shady dealings have come to light, and authorities are digging deeper." I couldn't suppress a grim smile. "Karma." "Indeed," Bennett said. "This won't directly affect your case, but it further tarnishes his reputation. Stay focused. The custody hearing is your priority." "I will," I promised. That night, as the house settled into an uneasy silence, I reviewed the recordings one last time. Each clip was a reminder of the betrayal, but it also fueled my determination. Andrew and Isabella thought they could manipulate me, control the narrative, and emerge unscathed. But they had underestimated the lengths I would go to protect my children. The hearing was approaching, and I knew it would be the defining moment. Everything I had fought for, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, would be laid bare. There was no turning back now. As I sat in the quiet of my office, a sense of resolve settled over me. They had started this war, but I was going to finish it. Chapter 7: The Custody Hearing. The day of the custody hearing arrived, bringing with it a storm of emotions. The courtroom was a battleground, and I knew the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about winning a case, it was about securing Liam and Sophie's future. It was about ensuring they were safe from the toxic grasp of Andrew and the chaos Isabella had created. I arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in a sharp suit that Owen had jokingly called my armor. Mr. Bennett met me outside the courtroom, his expression calm but serious. "You're ready for this," he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We have the evidence, and we have the truth on our side. Stay composed, answer clearly, and let me do the heavy lifting." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Isabella sat at one table, her lawyer whispering to her, while Andrew was notably absent, thanks to the restraining order. I avoided looking in her direction, keeping my focus on the stack of documents and flash drives in front of me. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The proceedings began, and Bennett wasted no time laying out the case. He started with the DNA results, presenting them as irrefutable proof of betrayal and manipulation. Then he moved on to the recordings, playing select clips that highlighted Andrew and Isabella's malicious intent. The courtroom echoed with Andrew's venomous words. "This isn't just about humiliation. This is about erasing him. Leo needs to see that he's nothing." Gasps rippled through the gallery as Bennett paused the video. "Your Honor," he said, addressing the judge, "these recordings demonstrate a calculated effort to undermine Mr. Carter's role as a father and to manipulate his children into believing lies about him. This is not a case of simple marital discord. This is psychological abuse." Isabella's lawyer objected, claiming the recordings were taken out of context. But Bennett was prepared, countering with additional clips that painted an even darker picture. "She's been raising your kids this whole time," Isabella's voice echoed from the speakers, cruel and dismissive. Can you imagine his face when he finds out? I hope he cries. I kept my expression neutral, even as the words stabbed at me like daggers. The judge leaned forward, her gaze sharp and unreadable. "Mr. Carter," she said, addressing me directly, "would you like to speak?" I stood, my palms sweaty but steady. "Yes, Your Honor." I took a deep breath and began. "This isn't just about infidelity or betrayal. It's about the impact on my children. Liam and Sophie deserve to grow up in a stable, loving environment. They don't deserve to be pawns in someone else's game. The evidence presented today isn't just proof of what I've endured, it's proof of what they've been subjected to. I'm asking for full custody because I want to protect them from further harm." The judge nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. You may sit." The hearing lasted hours, with Isabella's lawyer desperately trying to poke holes in the evidence. But the recordings, the DNA results, and my testimony were overwhelming. By the time Bennett delivered his closing argument, the outcome felt inevitable. "The court must prioritize the best interests of the children," Bennett said firmly. "Mr. Carter has demonstrated unwavering dedication to Liam and Sophie, despite the betrayal he's endured. We respectfully request full custody and limited, supervised visitation for Mrs. Carter." When the judge called a recess, I stepped out into the hallway, my heart pounding. Owen was waiting there, his usual smirk replaced with a look of quiet support. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I think we've got this," I said, though the knot in my stomach remained. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent again. Her voice was steady and deliberate as she delivered the verdict. "In light of the evidence presented, it is the court's decision to award full custody of Liam and Sophie to Mr. Carter. Mrs. Carter will have supervised visitation rights, contingent upon her compliance with court-mandated therapy. Furthermore, Mr. Andrews' involvement in this matter warrants a restraining order to ensure the safety of the children." A wave of relief washed over me, but I kept my composure. Isabella's face crumbled, her mask of confidence shattering as the weight of the decision sank in. Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. "This court is adjourned," the judge declared, and the room erupted into murmurs. I turned to Bennett, who offered me a rare smile. "Congratulations. You earned this." As I left the courthouse, Liam and Sophie were waiting with Owen outside. Sophie ran toward me, throwing her arms around my waist. "Dad," she cried, her voice filled with relief. I knelt down, holding her tightly. Liam joined us, his expression serious but hopeful. "It's over?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my voice steady. "Yeah, buddy, it's over." Owen clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it, Leo." They didn't stand a chance. I glanced back at the courthouse, where Isabella lingered on the steps, her lawyer trying to console her. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw the full weight of her choices reflected in her gaze. Then I turned away, focusing on what mattered, Liam and Sophie. That evening, as we sat together in the living room, the weight of the day began to lift. The kids were laughing again, their innocence slowly returning. I watched them, my heart full of gratitude and determination. The battle wasn't over. There would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time in months, I felt hope. My family wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I would do everything in my power to protect it. Chapter 8. Picking up the pieces. The days following the custody hearing felt like stepping into uncharted territory. There was relief, certainly, but it was laced with the sharp edges of uncertainty. Liam and Sophie were now officially in my care, but they had questions I wasn't fully prepared to answer. Isabella moved out the day after the verdict. She packed her belongings with an eerie quiet, the once vibrant energy that had filled the house replaced by a heavy, suffocating stillness. I didn't stop her, didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Liam and Sophie stood beside me on the porch as she drove away in a rented moving truck. Sophie clutched her stuffed bunny, her eyes brimming with tears. "Is Mom coming back?" she asked softly. I crouched down beside her, my heart breaking at the pain in her voice. "Not for a while, sweetheart," I said gently. "But you'll still see her sometimes. For now, it's just us." Liam didn't say anything. He stared at the road long after the truck disappeared from view, his jaw tight. I put a hand on his shoulder, but he shrugged it off and went back inside without a word. In the days that followed, I focused on creating a sense of normalcy for the kids. I took them to school, cooked their favorite meals, tried to fill the void that Isabella's absence had left. It wasn't easy. The wounds were fresh, and the shadow of Andrew's betrayal still lingered. One evening, as I was helping Sophie with her homework, she suddenly looked up at me. "Daddy, do you think Mom's sad?" I paused, taken aback by the question. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" She shrugged, fiddling with the edge of her notebook. "She cried a lot before she left. I don't want her to be sad." My throat tightened. "Your mom made some mistakes, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you," I said carefully. "She's just figuring things out right now." Sophie nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Do you still love her?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I loved your mom for a long time," I said. "But sometimes, love isn't enough to fix what's broken. What's most important is that we both love you and your brother. That will never change." She seemed to accept that, going back to her homework, but the weight of her question stayed with me. Liam, on the other hand, was harder to reach. He threw himself into his schoolwork and spent hours playing video games alone in his room. I tried to talk to him, but every attempt was met with a wall of silence. One night, as I was tucking him into bed, I decided to try again. "Hey, buddy, you can talk to me, right? About anything." He turned away, his voice muffled by the pillow. "I'm fine." "You don't have to be fine," I said gently. "It's okay to be upset. I'm upset too." He rolled over to face me, his eyes brimming with anger and confusion. "Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you stop Mom and Andrew?" The question gutted me, but I kept my voice steady. "I didn't know, Liam. I didn't see it until it was too late. But when I did everything I could to protect you and Sophie. I'm so sorry I couldn't stop it sooner." He stared at me for a long moment before nodding, his anger softening into something closer to understanding. "Okay," he said quietly. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, buddy," I said, brushing his hair back before leaving the room. As the weeks went by, the whispers in the neighborhood began to fade. Andrew's reputation was in ruins, his name tainted by scandal. I learned through the grapevine that he had resigned from several community boards and was facing financial investigations. He was no longer a looming threat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't done trying to claw his way back into control. Isabella, too, seemed to fade into the background. Our interactions were limited to brief, tense exchanges during her supervised visitation with the kids. She was polite, almost distant, as if trying to rebuild some semblance of her own dignity. I let her be. My focus was on Liam and Sophie. One afternoon, Owen called with an update. "Guess who's being investigated for fraud?" he said, his tone laced with satisfaction. "Andrew?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Bingo," Owen replied. "Apparently, he's been cooking the books for years. The IRS is all over him." I couldn't help but feel a grim sense of vindication. "Let him deal with the fallout," I said. "I've got bigger priorities." "Fair enough," Owen said. "But if you ever need a reminder that karma's real, just give me a call." I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Thanks, Owen, for everything." As the dust began to settle, I started focusing on the future. I hired a therapist for the kids, someone who could help them process everything they'd been through. I also started therapy myself, determined to rebuild not just for them, but for me. One evening, As we sat around the dinner table, Sophie suddenly smiled. "Daddy, can we have a movie night?" I glanced at Liam, who nodded reluctantly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds good." "All right," I said, my heart swelling with hope. "Movie night it is." As we gathered on the couch, blankets and popcorn in hand, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like we were moving forward, not as a broken family, but as a stronger one. Chapter 9: A New Beginning. Months passed, and life began to find a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was ours. Liam and Sophie were settling into the new normal, their laughter returning little by little. The weight of betrayal and chaos had started to lift, replaced by something fragile yet promising: hope. One morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the kids play in the yard. The crisp air carried the sounds of their laughter, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled without reservation. Sophie was chasing Liam, who was taunting her with a soccer ball, his mischievous grin lighting up his face. Owen pulled into the driveway, stepping out of his car with a triumphant smirk. "Morning, hero," he said, leaning against the porch railing. "What's up?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you'd like to know Andrew's fraud investigation is all over the news. He's officially been charged. Looks like he's going to trial." I nodded, a sense of justice settling over me. "Good. Let the system deal with him. You're not even going to celebrate a little." Owen teased. "I've got more important things to focus on," I said, glancing at the kids. "They're my priority now." Owen followed my gaze, his smirk softening into a genuine smile. "You've come a long way, Leo. You should be proud." "Thanks, Owen," I said, meaning it. "I couldn't have done it without you." He shrugged, grinning. "We're friends for." That evening after dinner, I sat down with Liam and Sophie for another family meeting. These had become a regular occurrence, our way of staying connected and addressing their questions. Tonight, though, I had something different in mind. I wanted to talk about the future, I began, glancing at both of them. "Things have been tough, but we've gotten through it together. And I think it's time we start thinking about what comes next." Sophie tilted her head, clutching her ever-present stuffed bunny. "Like what, Daddy?" "Like making some new traditions," I said. "Something just for us." Liam frowned thoughtfully. "Like what kind of traditions?" I smiled. "How about a family road trip this summer? Just the three of us. We can go wherever you want. Camping, the beach, maybe even the mountains." Their faces lit up, and for a moment, the weight of everything we'd been through seemed to vanish. Sophie clapped her hands excitedly. "Can we go see the ocean?" "Absolutely," I said. "Start making a list of places you want to visit." Liam's smile was smaller, but it was there. "I think that sounds cool." As the weeks turned into months, we took steps toward rebuilding. Therapy sessions became a safe space for all of us, a place where the kids could voice their fears and frustrations. I found my own solace in those sessions, learning to let go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. Isabella's visits with the kids were few and far between. She tried to reconnect with them, but the damage she and Andrew had caused left scars that wouldn't heal easily. I made sure to keep the focus on what was best for Liam and Sophie, refusing to let bitterness cloud my judgment. Andrew's trial became a spectacle, but I stayed far away from it. The media frenzy didn't concern me anymore. My lawyer kept me informed, assuring me that his downfall was inevitable. Knowing he was facing the consequences of his actions was enough. One sunny afternoon, as we walked along the beach during our long-awaited road trip, Sophie ran ahead, giggling as the waves lapped at her feet. Liam trailed behind, a camera slung around his neck, his new hobby, capturing moments that mattered. "Hey, Dad," Liam said, pausing to take a picture of the sunset. "Do you think things will ever be normal again?" I crouched beside him, watching the horizon. "What do you think normal is, buddy?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Just not like it used to be." I nodded, understanding what he meant. "I think normal doesn't have to mean the same as before. It can be something new, something better. It's up to us to decide what that looks like." He considered this for a moment before snapping another photo. "I like that," he said quietly. That evening, as the three of us sat around a campfire, roasting marshmallows under a sky full of stars, I realized we were finally moving forward. The shadows of betrayal no longer defined us. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. Daddy, Sophie said, her voice sleepy but content. This is the best day ever. I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. It's one of many to come, I promised. Liam leaned back in his chair, staring up at the stars. Yeah, he said softly. We're going to be okay. As I looked at my kids, their faces glowing in the firelight, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined us. We were a family, rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal, stronger and more united than ever. Together, we were ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, I believed in the future.